Yo, so guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to top 3 photos with disturbing backstories, part 18. Again, I just react to these randomly, but I'm kind of surprised. I didn't react to MrBallen for quite a long time, like a good maybe 2-3 months before I started doing these reactions again. And I wasn't expecting them to do very well. I was just wanting to bring them back because I found them quite fun to do, just his reactions in general. But I'll be honest, they're like some of the best performing videos on my channel at the moment, so that's pretty cool. Because I mean, the more reactions of these, the better, right? But these top 3 disturbing backstories the disturbing backstories videos are just like pretty wild, you know. His storytelling ability and plus just the stories themselves are pretty wild. So I could definitely do more of these. There's still loads more to do. So if you want them to keep coming, I'll keep reacting to them, plus all of his other videos too. And I mean, we're just going to get into the reaction. Hopefully you're going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Instagram, my Twitter if those want to follow me. Same for Patreon. There's a lot of Patreon exclusive videos that have gone up recently, plus videos from well over a year ago now. I've been using the Patreon for a long time, so if you're interested in that, links are in the description. But let's just check this out.
3 progressively more disturbing stories, and at the end of each of them, I will share the photo that is famously associated with them. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please build the like button's confidence way up and tell them to run for student body president. Help them hand out flyers, help them with their speech, and then when the big day comes, don't vote for them. Also, please subscribe to our channel, turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories.
How long has he had this intro for, by the way? I feel like he's had it forever, like forever.
There are 3 waterfalls spanning the Canadian-USA border that combined make up the famous Niagara Falls. They have a max height of about 170 feet at their highest.
You just know, obviously he's going to talk about it, but you know there's many stories surrounding like these waterfalls and just the Niagara Falls in general, because there's so many tourists here. You just know there's so many times where it's gone wrong. But look at this picture, oh my days. Which is this one side Canada and one side the US? This looks like the busier side. I don't know what side's seen as the busier. I don't know.
Point, and every
Look at that,
second,
with the boat there and everything.
700,000 gallons of water tumbles over the edge. The rapids above the falls are some of the strongest and most violent in the world, with a max speed of about 40 miles per hour right before you hit the edge. As a result, no one's allowed to boat or swim in the final 3.2 miles of the Niagara River that feeds into the falls. But back in the day, there was no such restriction. On the evening of July 16th, 1853, 3 men were working on a small barge anchored in the Niagara River about a half-mile away from the edge of the falls. Once they were done with work, the way they would get back to shore is by taking a rowboat and taking it downstream to the small island called Goat Island that sits right on the edge of the falls. Now, in order to get to that island, you would have to traverse the rapids. But it was only a couple hundred feet away, and because they worked here all the time, they had traversed the rapids many times before without incident. But this time, as soon as they got in, one of their oars broke. And so they weren't able to control their boat, and very quickly they got dragged into the rapids, started getting spun around, and then it capsized. Although they desperately tried to swim to shore, the rapids were just too strong, and 2 of them...
That's one of the things that makes me cringe, man. I mean, I can't swim anyway, so I'll be screwed. But when you're like, when I see like boats turn over and they like... What's the term he used? I forgot what the term he used. Capsize. God damn it, especially like in canoes when you're strapped in and stuff, it makes me cringe like crazy. You're just stuck underwater and you don't know what the fuck to do.
Or the rapids were just too
Obviously there's things that you can do, but in my mind I'm just thinking, god damn, just panic mode right now.
Strong, and 2 of the men were swept away to their death. But one man, Joseph Avery, was lucky enough that when he fell in, he drifted down and grabbed onto this tree root that was sticking out of the water. And so he pulled himself about halfway up out of the water, he caught his breath, and he's looking around and he can't believe he survived. But he wasn't out of the water yet, so to speak, because he was in the middle of these rapids and there was nobody on shore. It was getting late. His 2 buddies have drowned, and when he yelled out, the rapids were so loud nobody could hear him. And the log he was holding on to was totally slick, and so he had to grip it as hard as he could, otherwise he would just slip back into the water. And so all night, with half of his body in the water, he gripped onto this branch as tight as he could and just prayed he would survive. The next morning, when tourists arrived, they noticed Joseph out on this log, and they waved to him, and Joseph, who had used all his strength just to hold onto this log all night, was not only fatigued, but also was becoming hypothermic, and he very carefully removed one hand and he waved back. The tourists immediately notified authorities, and a rescue effort was launched. And because it was too dangerous to take a boat and try to drive down to Avery and pull him out that way because he was right near the edge of the falls, what they did is they went up to this little bridge that was upstream of Joseph, and they released rafts and small boats, hoping that one of them, just by chance, would get caught up on that log and he could grab it, and then Joseph could climb in, throw the rope out, and get pulled to shore. But unfortunately, after dozens of attempts, nothing came close to Joseph. Their next plan was to tie a long tether onto one boat and then guide it down the river until it reached Joseph, and this worked. But when Joseph climbed into the boat, it immediately began to capsize. And witnesses would say Joseph stood up, and as he was falling backwards, he threw his hands up in the air like he was surrendering. He let out a final scream and then fell under the turbulent waters, and then seconds later, he was swept off the falls to his death. Here is...
Jeez. Oh my god, he was so close to surviving. Oh my days, this is a real photo.
This is the final photo of Joseph Avery. It was taken by a journalist right before that boat with a tether attached to it arrived in front of him.
What the fuck? That one was wild.
Chad Lawhorn woke up in his Nashville home around 3 a.m.
What's his name?
Chad Lawhorn woke up in his Nashville home around 3 a.m. on April 8th, 2018. He had taken a long flight back from San Francisco the night before, so his sleep schedule was all messed up. Not feeling very tired, he decided to go downstairs to the kitchen to get a snack. And as he was walking down the stairs, he pulled out his phone and he saw a notification from his vendor.
I know this is very nothing to do with any of this story, but look at the size of this garage compared to everything else in this house. This is one huge ass garage. Are you having have you got a flipping fire engine in your house?
Pulled out his phone and he saw a notification from his Venmo account. His younger brother Casey had sent him $250, and attached to it was a single word note. It just said damages. Knowing his brother had long struggled with his mental health, Chad was concerned he was getting ready to hurt himself, and he had sent him this money as a way to compensate for the emotional toll he was about to inflict on him. Chad didn't even change out of his pajamas. He grabbed his keys, hopped in his car, and began driving the 2 hours to East Ridge, Tennessee, where his younger brother and his mother lived. On the ride there, he called both of them dozens of times, but he never got through. When he finally pulled onto their street, he looked down the road and he saw dozens of police cars and TV crews, and there was yellow crime scene tape all around their property. Chad just stopped the car right in the middle of the road and just stared. And he didn't know how long he was there for, but at some point, one of the police officers noticed him and walked up and knocked on his window. And when the officer found out who he was talking to, the news Chad was delivered was far worse than anything he was expecting. 24 hours earlier, Chad's younger brother, Casey, who was 23, was spending the day with one of his very good friends named Avery. They had gone to a comic book store to play Magic the Gathering, and then afterwards they headed back to Casey's house to go to bed. Around 12:30 in the morning, Avery fell asleep on the living room floor, and as Casey was getting ready to go to bed himself, his mother called him and asked if he could come pick her up at the bar. And so Casey begrudgingly agreed to do it. He drove to pick her up, and when he saw her, he could tell she was totally intoxicated. And the entire ride home, she just pleaded with Casey not to hurt himself because it would totally devastate her if he ever did that. Casey hated when she talked to him that way, and apparently she did this all the time. When they got back to the house, Casey dropped his mom off, and then he went up to his bedroom where he retrieved a rifle he had stolen from a friend. And then he paced around his room for a while, getting mentally prepared for what he was about to do. And
wait, how have you just jumped to that conclusion after your mum just said, oh my days, what the fuck?
When he felt ready, he left his room, he went downstairs to the living room where Avery was still asleep on the ground, and he placed the rifle up against the side of his head, and he fired one shot, killing his friend instantly. Once he was dead, Casey went upstairs to his mother's room. When he got to the threshold of her room, he pushed the door open and it was totally dark, but he could tell his mother was still awake in her bed. He raised his rifle and he fired, except the gun didn't go off. It jammed. His mother, because she was so intoxicated, did not hear the shot ring out, and she didn't really know what her son was doing in the doorway, so she did not raise any alarms. And so Casey just turned around, walked into the hallway where there was light, he fixed the jam in his gun, he turned back around, and this time his mother was now out of bed because the family dog was barking like mad, and so his mother was trying to calm the dog down, and she looked up and saw her son standing in the doorway carrying a gun, and so she just kind of froze and stared at him, and that's when Casey, without any hesitation, raises his rifle and fires 2 shots.
Oh my god, man. I hate people. I just hate people. I hate people so much. You're just a wrongin' in every way possible.
And his gun jams again. Now, neither of those 2 shots were fatal, although one of
Jammed
of them
again.
did strike her in the arm. And even though she was intoxicated, she was now fully aware her son is trying to kill her. And so she's screaming at him, "Why are you doing this? You're killing me!" Casey was totally unfazed. He flipped on the lights, he fixed the jam, he re-aimed at his mother, and his mother, who was still just standing next to the bed, looking at her son, wondering why this was happening, and Casey just aimed and took 2 shots, and these would be fatal. After that, he went downstairs and robbed Avery, and then he hopped in his car and he drove all the way to Mississippi, where within 24 hours, he would take his own life. We know all of these details because shortly after he committed these crimes, Casey posted a lengthy confession to Facebook detailing exactly what happened and what he did. This is a screenshot of the actual post. It's extremely graphic and it's since been removed from the social media platform. In his post, Casey says he feels extremely bad for his older brother Chad because he knows this is going to be extremely hard for him, and he encourages people to help his brother during this insanely difficult time. While he doesn't provide a specific motive for why he committed these crimes, he does say at the end of his confession that he's been thinking about murder a lot lately and wanted to know how it felt. But after doing it, he says he barely felt anything at all.
What the fuck, man?
In 1996, 28-year-old Paljor Tawang was offered the opportunity of a lifetime. Born and raised in a valley at the foot of the Himalayas, he was chosen to lead the first ever Indian ascent of the north face of the highest peak in the world, Mount Everest. He had left school after the 10th grade and joined the highly competitive and prestigious Indo-Tibetan Border Police. Created in 1962 in response to their domineering neighbor, China, the Border Police specialized in high-altitude landscapes. They had to, given that the boundary between India and China ran through the very rugged Himalayan mountain range. 12 years after joining the Border Police, Paljor was an expert climber and very well liked by his peers, making him an obvious candidate for one of the Border Police's most ambitious missions to date. While Paljor's mother was full of pride for her son's work and accomplishments, he didn't think she would be very supportive if she knew how dangerous the mission he was going on was. And so he told her he was climbing a different mountain, although she would find out through friends where he was actually going, and she would plead with him not to go, but Paljor was not about to change his mind. He was excited and he was confident. In May of that year, Paljor said bye to his family, and he and the other hikers set out on their journey. At first, it went extremely well. The weather was perfect, and the men seemed to be having an excellent time. But their luck would not hold. The team's final assault on the north face of Mount Everest was marked by mistakes, bad decisions, and very bad weather. According to the official report on the ascent, those problems started on the morning of May 10th when Paljor and the other 3 climbers woke up late. Instead of leaving base camp at 3:30 a.m. like they were planning to, they didn't leave until 8 a.m., so 4.5 hours late. Making matters worse, the weather continued to deteriorate with a blizzard moving in, creating near zero visibility. But even under the best of circumstances, Mount Everest is still a force of nature. The summit may be covered in colorful ropes and flags and climbers with their high-tech, shiny, beautiful gear, accompanied by a small army of Sherpas, but the outward appearance of commercialization is deceptive. Since 1924, at least 300 people have died on Mount Everest. The death to summit rate...
Wait, what? That's insane. How many people have tried climbing it?
300 people have died on Mount Everest. The death to summit ratio is a staggering 4%. The extremely high altitude, Everest reaches 5.5 miles into the sky, not only makes physical exertion extremely difficult, it affects your judgment and decision making, and not in a good way. Climbers and scientists have a name for the final half mile of Mount Everest. It's called the death zone because literally, while you're up there, you're dying. Oxygen is so limited up there that your cells just begin to die, and extremely fit people will have heart attacks and strokes and experience debilitating altitude sickness. The conditions are so severe that people have died from exhaustion just...
Wait, this is a real photo. What? What the fuck? This is insane. How are they even climbing this?
Standing in line waiting to reach the summit. But one of the biggest killers in the death zone is something called summit fever. When you get to that point in the climb, you are so close to reaching your goal. People will disregard safety and keep going on when really they should turn around and go back. Paljor and his 3 teammates were given strict orders to turn around at 3 p.m. if they had not reached the summit yet. But because of their late start, when 3 p.m. rolled around, they were not at the summit, they were in the death zone. One of the climbers who was with Paljor was the commander, and so at 3 p.m., when they were supposed to stop and turn around, he was at the very back of the climbing stack. And so he stopped and he yelled up to Paljor and the others and tried to get them to stop too so they could go back down, but either they didn't hear him or they just ignored him. Already suffering from frostbite and totally exhausted, he could not go any farther, so he grabbed his radio and he tried to hail them to tell them to stop and come back, but they didn't pick up their radio. And so the commander, after waiting for a few minutes, knew he had to go back down. And so he turned and began the descent. About 30 minutes later, the commander's radio crackled on again, and it was Paljor and the others. And they were informing him that they were going to make a push for the summit. They were about an hour away. And the commander said, "Stop, turn around. I'm ordering you to come back down. The weather is only getting worse." But whether they were suffering from summit fever or overconfidence, we don't know. But regardless, they refused. Frustrated and terrified for the other climbers, the commander just continued down the mountain. But 2.5 hours later, his radio crackled again, and this time it was Paljor and the others saying they had made it. They were standing on the summit of Mount Everest. The men had not just set a record for India, they had brought immeasurable honor to their country. The news sparked a huge celebration down in the base camp and also in the city of Leh, which is where the border police were located. But the party atmosphere would not last long. Shortly after the victory call, the weather turned from bad to horrible. What would later be known as the blizzard of 1996 had arrived in full fury, and by midnight that night, no one had heard from Paljol or the other two people he was with. And just a couple of days later, rescue climbers would confirm all 3 men had died. In the years following Paljol's death on the north face of Mount Everest, this hopeful and proud young Indian has become a sort of gruesome celebrity and landmark for the thousands of climbers that make it up into the death zone. Except now he's widely known on the internet and amongst people who are passionate about climbing the world's highest peak, not as Paljor, one of the first Indians to climb the north face of Mount Everest, but as Green Boots, which is a reference to the bright neon green boots he was wearing when he died. For more than 20 years, he's laid near the top of Mount Everest in a small limestone cave, wearing an orange parka and blue pants, and he's curled on his side with his arms wrapped around him like he's trying to keep himself warm. Since his death, anyone climbing the north face when the snow cover is light would literally have to step over his body to get to the top. But
what? That's nuts. I know there's a lot of dead bodies on this mountain, on Mount Everest, but Jesus.
Paljor is not the only dead body on Mount Everest. There are over 200 other dead climbers littering the slopes of the world's highest peak. It's just too dangerous and too expensive to try to get them down, and so they stay wherever they died. Which means if you climb Mount Everest, you will literally be climbing over dead bodies on your way to the summit. But of all the bodies on Mount Everest, the most famous by far is Paljor. Here is an image of Paljor, aka Green Boots.
Oh, that's his body.
So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know.
God damn. This series is insane, man. Whenever I'm feeling bad about my general lack of ambition, I always remind myself that every corpse on Mount Everest was once a highly motivated person. That's one way to look at it. My therapist recommended me to listen to stories or a story before bedtime to calm my nerves. I don't think this is what she meant. Probably not. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this reaction. If you want more of these disturbing backstory reactions, let me know in the comments which one you want to see next, and I'll be sure to do so. And I mean, yeah, until next time, like, subscribe. Peace.